Welcome to another draft physics presentation and such. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I guess I'll post a link below. I did do a review of the movie Interstellar as part of one of my videos on my primary channel, the life debunking channel. So just in case you wanted, the debunking of the bullshit physics in the movie Interstellar. So in case there's anybody here who didn't come from the other channel and doesn't know about it, I'll post a link to where in the video the movie review begins and such. Something like that. That's my intention, if I remember. Which after doing Ken Wheeler video, I might not remember anything anymore. Oh, it's such a brain pain. But anyway. Alright, so Ken Wheeler has done a couple of videos. So his latest one is called Vortex Tension Tether and Magnetism, which apparently has something to do with vortexes being formed by some sort of tension, blah 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 blah. And he was talking about how he's getting prepared for his big July presentation at the meeting of the Tinfoil Hat Society, the Tesla Tinfoil Hat Society, TTTF or something. TTTS. Yes, that works out, doesn't it? I need an H in there, though. Yes, HS. Okay, so TTTHS Society. But anyway, I mean, they're all just such nutters. There's 5,000 times more torque in my Tesla torquetizer, than any engine in the universe. Except it doesn't work. It works in theory. It's a theoretical Tesla torque toroidy. Yeah, it's all this tease. Anyway, so then he did another one called Fields and Matter. The radical answer is too extreme, so maybe we'll play some of that. I don't know. Basically implying, which isn't all that radical an idea, that E equals mc squared, which is basically that matter is energy, which isn't a big huge surprise to a lot of people, but whatever. But this one was just field torsion, AC generators, and fallacy of something or other, of emotive conversion. So it was just some long blah where he just kept saying motors don't touch each other, the parts, and therefore it's magic. I mean, it just wasn't saying anything in the sense that we all sort of know that there's this conversion process. You convert movement into electricity and then turn the electricity back into movement, and he's kind of arguing that somehow there isn't any, maybe no torsion, no tension in that system. And I would argue, of course, there is. You're basically moving magnetic things connected by magnetism, and so you are moving things. But anyway, and you're certainly moving. You're moving the elemental bits in a pressurized field, and that pressure is merely being. You could just think of it as simple as, you could say that the magnetism compresses the wire, and the bulge of compression travels through the wire, and the wire compresses at the other end, and that compression is reconverted back into movement. So you could almost make it that simple, and it's, in my opinion, quite logically reasonable. So anyway, we'll play some of this, and well, another video I wanted to sort of throw in. So the Bill the Hilster guy did do an explanation of what he calls the Earth's magnetic field, and applying his particle stuff to it, guru stuff, and again he breaks it down into this movement again, and it's this field moving. And everybody does this, like these lines represent movement, and this is a big Ken Wheeler thing, that this is all happening, all this motion is happening, and there isn't any motion. So I'll just play this a little bit.
Offset. from the spinning axis. Nonetheless, it's still going around, and it flows. G1 particles flow in that direction.
Right,
This, in
so
my mind,
G1 particles are the same for him as photons and electrons are all the same thing somehow. And somehow that flow obliges the magnet to line up with the flow, something like that. And in my opinion, it can be deduced that this isn't the correct answer just by the fact that we would have the technology to be able to see a flow. If there was actual movement, we would be able to come with little bits of magnetite that are small enough that they would be moved by the current, that kind of thing. And even electrons and stuff we could put into the field, the plasma, and lots of ways to see it if it actually existed. And so, but we can't make that happen. Can't show any movement in a dead magnet. So anyway, so yeah, let's do some of this Ken stuff, and then I think we'll just draw a picture and call it a day, kind of a thing. Something like that. I guess I could pick up.
You want to create a stunning website?
Yeah.
I've already done it with Wix.
You're a twat.
Let me show you how it's done.
Extremely
I'm gonna need to put these. I can't see without them.
Hate your guts.
Just go to Wix.
So twatty. Ugh. People on Earth are so creepy. That guy selling stuff, which just is amazing me. Oh yeah, I'm gonna trust that guy. He doesn't seem at all like a used toothpaste salesman. No, he seems like a real upright, rational fella. He's selling used toothpaste, no doubt about it.
Oh, most people are not concerned with electrical theory because it doesn't stick money in their pockets. Even people that are electrical engineers, they know how to fix stuff. They're taught how to, do this, do that. Yeah, they don't care about electrical or field theory. Now, specifically AC generator.
So just some sort of bizarre blanket statement for which he has no evidence that they don't care or they're not interested in the subject, when there seems like there's a ton of them doing this whole Tesla thing, searching for the holy, magical, free electricity, free energy, bullshitty thing.
AC generator. Of course, left with the notion that either wind or water or steam turbine, in the case of a nuclear power plant, we're actually changing mechanomotive force into electromotive force, right?
Mechanomotive force, a word I've never even heard before, so yes, keep using rhetoric that's just made up. That's so much, that makes this physics seem so reasonable. It's when you completely make up entirely new concepts and just throw the word out there like it's a real thing. Like hydroxide or whatever the fuck you called water.
The stator, magnetic field, dielectric reflector. And the real question remains is that, the big thing that actually stupefies humanity in most cases is they have descriptions for things but no explanation. Specifically, since we're talking about
Right, and there's no explanations in any of his videos, so this is the funniest part. He keeps talking about this bad denotating that the world's doing, and then he doesn't denotate any fucking better.
contact. I wonder if we could entertain a notion that you're first going to call me an insane heretic for, but then possibly go slightly deeper down the rabbit hole intellectually on your behalf, and ask yourself the question,
that was another thing he said in his video where he's talking about the torsion vortex thing. Is he's talking about how he has all these other ideas that he's never said in videos, and all these other explanations and all this stuff that he's never done in videos. And you're saying, well, why haven't you done it in videos? I've been watching you for at least 2 or 3 years now, and you've had plenty of opportunity to spill the real beans. If you have some set of real beans somewhere, why don't you get around to throwing those into the videos already? Let's get to the real beans. Why the bullshit all this time?
Is an AC generator, whether it's driven by steam or wind or...
let's understand his profile on the page where he's doing this thing in July. It talks about, it doesn't even say much about his magnetism theories. It just it talks about his Buddhism of some kind. So apparently this is all about some kind of Buddhism.
Or water. Does it actually generate power directly? Why, sure it does. This is Tesla's invention. This is the AC generator.
Well, as anything direct, I could say words, and it's sort of a direct thing. The vibrations hit your eardrums. It's kind of a direct offense on your sensibilities in a sense. But there is something subtly indirect in the sense that you need a translator. You need to know what English is to be able to make any sense out of the bang, 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 bangs happening in your eardrum. So is it direct communication or is it indirect communication? So that word is kind of useless in these physics conversations because you have to maybe use words like primary, secondary, tertiary, something like that.
Is there actually any component that actually creates power in the case of just a simplex?
A simplex, now why don't you just say simple? So this is a time when you just don't need to plexify everything. So all this plexifying is just totally unnecessary. Just say that yes, water traveling downhill because of gravity and moving, yes, is that motion somehow directly connected to the electricity created in a wire by turning magnets in a motor? And I guess I would argue that if you really just follow the forces, it's all pretty direct.
AC generator. Or is it the case that we're creating...
Let's also understand all generators are AC generators technically. You have to augment them to make them into DC. So they're all in their native naked state AC generators.
A perturbation in the inertia vis-a-vis torsion. Of course, nothing directly comes
vis-a-vis torsion. So now it's a perturbation that has torsion. Now see, those are two different concepts. Radio waves traveling between two things, there's no real torsion there. I mean, it'd be pretty hard to imagine that you could, I suppose you could imagine it. I mean, if you have a light enough magnet far enough away and you could sit there and lift it up with radio waves by, having them, on either side of it or something, and you could levitate something through some sort of torsion. But the idea of calling it torsion, it's only torsion if it's again with something compatible. Magnet on magnet is torsion.
out of an AC generator. Well, certainly power does at X number of voltage and amperage. Efficiency of the generator. Talk about the stator. When you talk about whether it's a four-phase. Let's not get into the technical stuff that will confuse people. Let's just talk about a simplex.
Yes, the simple AC generator. Yes, let's just talk about a simple generator that just switches the magnetic field every 180 degrees. Simple motor. Yes.
AC generator as powered by water or steam or wind. There's no contact. So there's no actual direct transference of the mechanomotive force into electrical.
Right. Okay. So you could say that there's no direct contact with us in gravity, right? If you want to believe gravity is a vaporous, vacuous thing, then there's no direct contact. But if you think your ether is something real, then you would say you are having direct contact with the ether. The jello is pushing you. Something like that. You could say things like that anyway. Alright, so this is, I think, a suitable time to inject the drawings and such. Oh, yeah. That seems simple enough. Let's move this paper over a little bit. Move this paper over a little bit. Yeah, probably move it over further, get this little mouse the hell out of the picture. That seems good enough. Alright. So, alright, let's just draw this basic image of the, the magnet. And I guess I'll just make one side red and one side black, and then you can figure that out on your own. But anyway, alright, and so they always draw the force lines, which, are just they're just what you detect when you put an instrument of a certain kind in the way of the field. This is what the field will do. So you can put little bits of magnetic material, and that's what it becomes. It becomes little magnets. So let's understand, it's really just putting compasses. So these are just compasses you're putting at different locations, and you're saying which way does the compass needle point. So I guess I could just make the compasses into the little magnets that they are by turning them black and red, and you'll get my point. So people think that because the compass needles point, so to speak, that this is some sort of movement, that there's a flow of something that's going out one end and it's going in the other end. And so this is all some sort of great adventure created by the magnet, that it's somehow making electrons or making something in the atmosphere move in these directions. So there's all this motion taking place. And I would argue that that would require energy, and there's no evidence of any energy source for moving all of those bits outside of the magnet. Now, the real thing that's happening, okay, the real truth, is much simpler. Well, much, let's see, what's a good word for much simplexer? Yeah, it's much simplexer. Okay, the real truth is that the field energy, that is gravity, okay, bent space, I don't care. I guess you could still use bent space in some kind of weird metaphor here. I could sit there and try to figure out some way to make bent space do magnetism by the same principle, by just making the bent space on and off or something, polarizing it in some sense. But you have to polarize this stuff. See, these people just don't get that polarization means something. These monopoles mean something. These poles mean something. So the point is the force goes in all directions. So it's coming in from over here, and it's coming in from over here, and over here, and over here. It's coming in from all directions, and it's moving in a straight line. And what happens is when it goes into the magnet, if a black thing goes in this side, it comes out this side. Okay. And if a red thing goes in this side, it comes out this side. Okay, retaining some proportionality. So, you know, whatever angle the black thing is changed by, the red thing will be changed by exactly the same angle. So you have exactly the same force coming. This force will be exactly the same amount of force over here. It's just that it will be segregated when it comes out over here into two forces separated. You know, the two forces will be white and black, red and black, whatever. They'll be separated. But it's the same exact amount of force. So when it hits a regular gravitational object, you know, something non-magnetic that has all of its bits are all mixed up, it can't see the segregation at all. It just doesn't mean anything to a regular piece of matter because it's just force. That's all it sees here. The regular matter only can interpret arrows. It can't interpret color. It can't tell the difference between a red one or a black one. Because it's all mixed up. But if it comes in contact with another magnet, which all these little compass needles are, so let's put a compass up here. So we have a compass needle up here, and what the compass needle is doing is this force is all leaving in straight lines, dead straight lines coming out. It's all straight lines, really straight. And so the compass needle, what's going to happen is the red is going to repel the red because that's reflective, very reflective. And so if the red was, you know, if this compass needle was turned 90 degrees, you could understand that the red's going to push hard, go up, go up, go up. And the black end, because there's less pressure, because it's black on red and it's letting all the pressure out, that's going to keep saying closer, closer, closer. So the black end's going to swing towards and the red end's going to swing away. And so the compass needle will always turn to maximize that efficiency. And then as you start moving the compass needle to these other locations, it will start feeling the force from the other end of the magnet. Where it couldn't feel it at this end, it'll start feeling a balance of force. So it'll feel some of the repulsive force from the bottom of the magnet will be hitting the black. And so now the black is going to say, well, I want to get to this red, if it's here, but this one's pushing me away, so it's going to line up so it has to reflect this repulsion. And where it still wants to do the maximize its closeness to the red end, so it will actually be turned this way, red down, right? Yes, right. And so then as it goes over here, it'll end up just paralleling this magnet in reverse, because the two attraction forces will be maximized, and so will the repulsion forces. And the same thing goes at this other end. The black on black is going to be repulsive, so it's going to be red, and the black will be pushed away. So there's no flow. It just gives the image of flow because of the way the compass needles line up. And are the iron filings. Like I said, iron filings just turn into little magnets. So the only time a conductor moves in a magnetic field is because the conductor has been magnetized by the exposure to the field. That is, its internal structure now has some magnetism, and the bits are going to start filtering the force just like this magnet is filtering it. So if there was a wire being exposed to this magnetism, what's going to happen to the wire is it's going to acquire a little bit of magnetism, segregation of force, and the wire will now behave as a magnet because of the fact that you have by compressing, by one force being repulsive and one force being attractive, you have pushed all the electrons to one side or the other, depending on the force, and essentially created a disproportional circumstance where there's more electrons at one end than there are at the other end, that kind of thing. You've squeezed the electrons, would be a better way to say it. So you've squeezed the electrons to one end by compressing by pushing the electrons down. They have to go out because the wire itself won't compress, something like that. And likewise for the protons. The protons are rising as you do that. The same place that repels the electrons, pushes the protons out, so it becomes proton heavy. The point is, it just becomes a magnet because you've segregated the electrons from the protons to some slight degree, which is all you need to create this filter. And that's all a magnet is. So a magnet's just a filter. All it does is filter force that's already in the field, and it releases that force in rays, straight line vectors. There's absolutely no hyperboreloiding going on, around hourglasses, vortexes. There's no vortexes, and there's no hyperboreloiding. None of that stuff's happening. So anyway, and so this is consistent with what you observe in experiments, because stuff doesn't try to move up or down, doesn't try to move around at all. It's very static. Because there is no moving force outside of the magnet except for the fact that the force is moving in rays that are segregated. Electron rays coming out of one end, proton rays coming out of the other end, if that makes it simpler for you. So, I think that's enough. So we'll play a little more of this and then we'll just give up. Sounds like a brilliant Gary. You'll notice.
Motive power generation.
There's nothing
not
new
from the
to say.
magnets, not from the stator. So what are we actually talking about? Now we think, well, and this is the case that we can use, for example, in the case of power transmission. At Niagara Falls, we have water creating...
See, he keeps arguing, we think, they think, this, and it's like certainly I'm providing him an opportunity to debunk a theory, a statement about a directly opposite theory than his, okay, one that's complete particles, whereas his is complete waves. So you have a great contrast there. So, but he doesn't want that challenge. He just wants to keep arguing dead physicists and quote mining, so to speak, any ones that might be living. I mean, I suppose if Feynman was still living, he'd still be saying the crap he says about Feynman, because he knows Feynman's not going to show up and say, why are you talking shit about me, fucking fatty? So he has no fear that they're going to show up and actually start interrogating him on how he's paraphrasing their understanding of fields, the fields they've been studying their whole life. The point I would make is that this word fields, to be fair to it, you have to understand that a lot of physicists do understand that the field is made of forces. You know, it's a force field. It isn't a field of nothing, it's a field of something, and the something is the force. Now whether the force is a particle or perturbation, that's to be debated. But there is, I don't think, there's reason to debate it, but I'm just saying, why don't you find one of these people who are alive and debate with somebody alive that can actually defend themselves against your stupid knuckle-dragging bullshit accusations. Like they haven't thought about it enough. Why don't you prove that by actually interacting with a real person who's willing to respond to your bullshit accusations?
Mechanomotive force, which as a result into the AC generators, the gigantic ones, very beautiful system, or create an electromotive force, and at the other end some guy flips a switch and it transfers into mechanomotive force again. Say he turns on his fan, because it's really hot outside. So we actually have a transference of mechanomotive into electromotive, and then electromotive is tapped off.
Right, so the moving magnetic field, but again, let's understand, the magnetic field only has to move because the wire balances the we can't balance the pressure. So when you have the magnetic force on something, it moves stuff, and then the stuff stops moving. So once the pressure balances, in the sense that once you move the electrons and the protons move forward, once the compass needle sets in position, it just stays there. So keeping one magnetic field on constantly can't make much happen. Once you have the initial movement, you won't have any more movement inside the wire. You need to get the electrons to move in the wire. You need them to vibrate. And the only way you can do that is you have to turn off the magnetism, then turn back on, then turn it off, then turn it on, then turn it off, then turn it on, then turn it on. See, once you have the movement, then you can receive the pressure change movement at the other end of the wire. The electrons going in and out. You know, it's kind of, it's, there's fornication everywhere in, reality. It just happens to be everywhere. Lots of positive to negative, lots of stick to hole kind of bullshit going on in the universe.
On the power lines and transformers, and ultimately someone flips a switch, and we either generate more electromotive power generation through illumination. Let's just say a fan. We actually have another motor, which is tapping power off to create mechanomotive force again. Mechanomotive force is not
mechanomotive. I mean, what's the point of that? I mean, you have movement, right? So you had movement over here with the water, and then you just replicate it with round movement here with the fan. And you're saying, how did we do that? Well, what you did was you locked two magnets together, okay, and then you had one magnet essentially spun the other magnet, which happened to be a conductor, and the spinning conductor is now producing electricity, so to speak. That might be another way to say it, is you're locking the magnet to wire in a sense, and as you turn the magnet, you're twisting the wire. You might even think of it that way, and you're just picking up the twist on the other end. But there is tension created by the locking force of the paramagnetism, the temporary magnetism created in the conductor.
Into the electromotive current production. There is no direct causality, specifically if you want to get into nitpicks. There is no direct causality between the moving conductor from mechanomotive means, water flowing, wind flowing, nuclear steam turbine. Now this is where you're going to call me a heretic and an insane, fat, bald, tattooed lunatic, but this is just...
Yeah, whatever. Nobody else wants to really play that game as passionately as you do, okay? So I'm really not interested in calling you a name. I'm interested in saying, well, what's your definition of direct? Because, everything in a way is indirect. I could actually, if I punch you in the face, did my atoms actually hit your atoms? Or did the magnetic forces of repulsion by my electrons come in contact with your electrons, and they got too close together, and the magnetic force pushed it apart, created the pressure that pushes your atoms. But there was never any real contact. There was never a direct impact. I never directly interfered with your atoms because there was a force between my fist and your skin. So technically it's the same thing. So again, it just depends on how you want to. I'm just saying it's not very useful language to start talking about indirect and direct in a physics conversation, because that's sort of the whole point of the physics thing, is to argue it's all Rube Goldberg. It all is all direct. The bowling ball rolls down the ramp, it hits the pin hits the pancake flipper, the flipper flips the troll doll, across the room, it lands on the dominoes, it's all direct. It's just that it's not always visibly direct.
It's because you're not thinking at all. Just hold on a minute. And the generation of said power, electromotive force. Mechanomotive force applied to the rotor does not generate power unless applied in the presence of a non-contact stator magnetic field. What exactly is going on, since there is not...
Well, all that crap doesn't mean anything either. The stator, all this other shit, you can make a really simple electrical motor, that all it does is reverse the polarity of the wire. So all you're doing is mechanically changing which way the current will go through the wire. So you're just basically saying you're switching the magnetism, and therefore you're making the pressure switch side to side, as it turns opposite on the other magnet. Obviously, if you flip the magnet back and you could just do it by hand. You could turn a magnet back and forth, and what you're doing is pressurizing, depressurizing, pressurizing, depressurizing. But you have to allow for the depressurization before you can pressurize again. That's just the whole point. The point is you have to allow the material to rebound for you to be able to move it again. You can't push something up against the wall and say, I'm going to punch you in the face, and then push them up against the wall again. You already pushed them up against the wall. The only way you can push them up against the wall is to let them fall off the wall and then push them back up on the wall. You can't push them up twice in a row. You have to let it relax.
Direct transference of that the mechanomotive force into the creation of electromotive force in the case of power generation, a la the AC generator in simplex.
In simplex.
Is this the part where you're going to call me a heretic and a lunatic?
No,
sure there is. We start to drive it. Stator, current, power generation.
Quit saying simplex. Save it. Save it for those real special moments. Don't use it more than once in a video, and save it for when it's really going to mean something. But don't just say it for no reason. It's really simple is all you had to say. You didn't have to say it's really simplex.
Really? I mean, is that the case, that the actual mechanomotive force is somehow passed into something and is converted into electromotive power generation? That doesn't occur in any AC generator on Earth.
Well, the point is it's all just movement. And where's the original movement? Well, that's in the field. That's the field force, the only force that exists. And when you segregate it, it's magnetism. When you leave it mixed up, it's gravity. And when you send it off at a frequency, it's photons of, for example, light. And it's really that simplex. See, use it with emphasis. It's really that simplex. See, that's how to do it.
If that's the case, then where is the power coming from? Of course, that's obvious, but there's no direct causality like billiards hitting on the table. Well, billiard A, which would be mechanomotive.
So the amazing thing is, he says, where does the power come from? I don't know, like he's being sarcastic or something. When people could ask him, well, Ken, where does the power come from? What's your explanation of where the power comes from, Ken? He hasn't provided that, by the way.
Motive force. It's billiard B, which is electromotive force, and here we have power generation. We're not talking about like a chain reaction in nuclear fission or fusion where uranium nuclei are heating up.
Yes, it's just like a chain reaction. It's all the same thing. It's all about the movement of electrons. Yes, everything that happens, everything that moves, guess what? The little nuclear bits have to do the moving. If I move, the nuclear bits have to move. If this pen moves, the nuclear bits have to move. Everything that moves, it's the little bits that are actually doing the moving. They're the ones on the ground with little wheels saying, I gotta get going. And, you know, they're the ones pushing their wheelchair, however you want to metaphor it. They're the ones that have to have the little rocket engines on them to push them somewhere. They have to do the moving, or you don't go anywhere. If they don't move, nothing moves. So it's all nuclear.
Other uranium nuclei, we end up with a chain reaction of the release of power.
Yes, because there's a whole bunch of force between the little bits inside the atoms. And when you break the atoms apart, you have extra little bits left over. So you break a big piece into two little pieces, and the little pieces are only 85% of the weight of the original big piece. And so all the little bits that are left over are all those little wheelchairs go flying out of there. You know, because they're free. They're going, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do, but I'm free, and I'm going, I'm leaving, I'm heading for another galaxy. You know. It's always nuclear. Everything is nuclear. Everything, the little bits actually are the ones that are tied to ropes, or however you want to look at it that way, or they're the ones that are, they all have poking sticks, you know, that reach each other. And so if somebody pokes me, I poke the other fucker in front of me. But those are the sticks that make the world happen. That's where the game is the little bit has to say, somebody's poking me, I'll move it forward. You know.
There is no direct causality between the mechanomotive force and the electromotive power generation. All energy release of the electromotive current is due to field torsion with a temporal variable.
Okay, field torsion with a temporal variable. And that's supposed to just sing. That's supposed to be like, oh, zing, I get that one. That's just as, wow. Of course, it's torsion temple. Torsion temple-y. More T words. Yeah, see, they're all over the place, these T words.
Of change applied to the static field hypostases or hypostasis.
Oh, the static field hypostases. What the? So who's listening to this? Who knows what the fuck that means? Hypostases. I mean, what the hell is that? You should definitely have to sit in the corner for using a word like that. Turn around, sit in the corner for 10 minutes, and say, I will not hypostases in public. That's just rude.
Depending on how you want to pronounce it. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Hypostases with a resultant manifestation of electromotive power generation.
Right, so you can see him reading from his iPod there, and pad, and it's like, why would you read that? You shouldn't even have wrote that. Certainly it's a crime to read it.
I'm pausing intentionally. The rest inertia is the hypostasis or hypostasis of the ether, of counter space. I don't care what you want to call it. But you can apply any sort of pathetic term you want to counter space or the inertial plane.
Whatever. You really should come up with some kind of common vocabulary. It makes life so much easier when you have common words for things. Like blue is blue. It's not hypostases or blibble or fluck-luck-luck or some other kind of... It's no, you have blue, 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 blue. Blue, black, red, simple words describing things. Let's do that. Don't pretend it doesn't matter. It matters. I mean, figure out what you want to call it. Ether, inertia, counter space. Pick one and stick with it.
From whence all power generation occurs. A change in that inertia necessitates the loss of inertia resultant in the electromotive current generation, i.e. power generation. There is no direct causal link between the mechanomotive force and the electromotive release or creation.
Well, of course there is, and as I've explained it, it's because just as gravity is connecting us to the Earth, magnets are connecting electrons to other electrons and protons to other protons, and that's what they're doing. They're connecting protons to protons and electrons to electrons, connecting them in the repulsive sense.
Creation, so if you want to say release or creation of energy, correctly would be stating, well, actually both are correct, say creation and release. In the case of any AC generator, is there actually anything coming out of it? We can't think in terms of atomism. If there were actually something, and this of course is not how people technically think, in the case of an AC generator, and some of them have been operating nearly, 6
Right, so all you have to do is think about the AC generator is basically just squeezing the wire. It goes squeeze, 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 squeeze. So it squeezes it, relaxes it, squeezes it, relaxes it, squeezes it, relaxes it, squeezes it, relaxes it. That's all. Nothing more complicated than that. High pressure, low pressure. High pressure, low pressure. That's it. Simple enough. It's that simplex to understand. And the pressure moves through the movement of electrons. The pressure moves through the movement of electrons, and it's called voltage. And that's how it moves through the wire. And it moves fast. Not the speed of light, but fast. Because electrons move fast. Well, the bits between the electrons move fast. The speed of light. But they're communicating through an imperfect, channel. So it takes them a little while to get through it because they're not going perfectly straight. The pressure doesn't move perfectly straight through the conductor. It takes a little jig-jaggy pathway because there's resistance in the wire. In the sense there's atoms that are still holding the stuff together, so not all the atoms can be lined up to move force efficiently. Some of them are going to be anti-aligned and cause a little bit of a slowdown in progress.
70 plus years with very little downtime to fix some worn parts, like on bearings. Nothing is being released out of there on the atomistic scale. We're talking about spontaneous generation of power through a temporal variable change in the inertial plane of the torsion of the...
Alright, so nothing happens spontaneously. So again, it's just a silly word. So you're going to pretend you're a physicist, that you've studied all of the books that have ever been written, all this stuff, and you think that the word spontaneous is a useful term in talking about anything in the known physical universe. I would say that you've missed a few chapters somewhere if you think spontaneous is a useful word. That's not a word just made for silly people. Like Sasquatch. Sasquatch is a word for silly people. Smart people don't use a bunch of neurons worrying about Sasquatch. Well, I would argue people who understand something about physical dynamics, the word spontaneous don't even need that one in the vocabulary. Silly concept.
Dielectric reflector. Talking about the magnets in the stator field, whether four-phase or otherwise. There is no direct causal link between mechanomotive force created vis-a-vis water or steam or wind into the creation of electromotive force in any AC generator.
Right, so he just keeps saying there's no direct causal link, but again, then you can say there's no direct causal link between any physics objects, because every one of them is a conversion of one kind of energy into some other kind of energy. I mean, even your eardrum, it converts vibrations into electricity. I mean, but it would be stupid to say there's not a direct connection between the movement of the air and the creation of that electricity.
The only thing mechanomotive force is doing is turning a stator relative to a magnetic field. There is no direct...
And as you turn it, you pressurize and depressurize, voltize. You voltize. There, I'll create a new word for you. You voltize the wire. Okay? And that means pressurize. So we're using voltize to say pressurize. And so you voltize the wire as you turn the wire in the field. It goes high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure. And so you're voltizing the wire. There. I did it for you. I did some good physics for you there. Yeah, that's good for your book. Voltize is an excellent word. Use that one.
Conversion, absolutely none, between the mechanomotive force and the power generation. There is no conversion. We're talking about non-contact. We're not talking about, like, say, if you apply like a windmill. A windmill, of course, is used to grind grain into flour so you can make bread. Well, the wind is driving the blades on the windmill, which is in turn turning a giant grist mill, and you pour in...
Well, you should have put in there gears. See, so he didn't, guess he couldn't think of the word, but there's gears. So the gear turns this way, and that turns a gear going this way, and then that converts that back into a gear turning this way that turns the big cement thingy, you see. So you should have said gears are doing the conversion. So a force of wind pushing on the fans of the windmill, the blades, is turned into pressure on flat surfaces on orbital objects. Orbital? It's probably another word for that. Round things, wheels.
We're talking about direct contact. We have direct causation. The wind is driving this, which is driving a wooden axle, as it was, back in the day. Still, some of them still exist, and making direct contact, stone between stone. This is direct conversion. There is no causality or direct conversion between mechanomotive force and power generation in an AC generator. There is none. The only thing that is occurring...
Right, but so you could argue, though, that in physics the same thing is happening. Again, it's Rube Goldberg. So you don't consider the fields, the force fields created between magnets to be like gears. They're creating tension and opportunity to create pressure. But it's the same thing, really. If you could see the little bits, you wouldn't sit there and say there's no physicality here. Because you would see the physicality. You'd see the stuff flowing. Hey, there's a whole bunch of red shit. There's a whole bunch of black shit. And the little electrons, when the black shit hits them, they move this way. And when the red shit hits the protons, they move that way. And vice versa. They move out when the black force hits. And yeah, so, you would see it happening and say, oh yeah, it's obvious. This is physical. There's a bunch of physical bits hitting the shit. It's like raindrops or something. Little missiles. You'd get it. You wouldn't say if I shoot a missile and hit a rock or something. Well, I wouldn't hit a rock. I mean, I'd shoot a missile at the United States, frankly. So anyway, if I shoot a missile at the United States, you wouldn't say, hey, that's not physical. Yeah, sure it is. It'll be pretty fucking physical.
Is that we're creating a temporal variable upon which torsion is created. And that torsion in the inertia, in the ether, of the geometry of the AC generator is power generation.
Okay, see, I wouldn't use the word torsion for that because that's just not. I don't think it's denotative specifically. So I think you want to use the word like tension. There's tension created, and tension allows for torque. Torque would be the definition of how strong the tension is. It'd be a way of measuring the strength of the tension would be torque.
That power generation, of course, is none other than the release of energy from counter space. It amazes me that in each and every book...
release of energy from counter space, which is release of energy from ether, which, okay, as long as the ether can be particles, then we agree. Okay, black and red particles. So if the ether can be made of black and red particles, we completely agree. Except I wouldn't have described it any way you did at all.
On an AC generator or power generation, mechanomotive force is in the stator against a rotating magnetic field, transferred or exchanged, we'll use the word exchanged, or converted into power generation.
Bravo.
There is no direct causal
between them. Conversion, that's right. But it's still direct. So again, you can say it's not direct, but it's direct. It's a pretty direct thing. Squeeze, let go. Squeeze, let go. Squeeze, let go. Pretty direct. So anyway, enough already. It just goes on and on like this, and you won't benefit from any more. You probably would have benefited from a little less. But anyway, I think I've done what I wanted to do here. I mean, I just wanted to make the argument again that the way they illustrate these forces as moving around objects and stuff, they just don't do that. That's just what the test instruments can give you the illusion of. But there's no actual physical moving in the directions they think. The only way this stuff moves, it radiates like light bulbs. And you could think of a light bulb, a hot light bulb, and you could put it in a cold fog, and you could see all kinds of thermal currents created. But you would know that the light bulb isn't doing that. That's a byproduct. And these, I'm not saying there's any kind of thermal currents even. I'm just saying that you can see in certain things where there can be side effects that could create movement or something. But the truth is the field lines are just a representation of the strength of the force in different locations. But the force is going exactly perpendicular to those field lines. The actual force is traveling perpendicular to those lines. There is no force following the path of the lines. Okay, I think that's explicit enough. It's a pretty fundamental element of physics, and the fact that they keep talking about these right-hand rules and the movement of these currents. There really aren't any of these kinds of currents. There are real currents inside of conductors, but there are no currents moving around the outside of conductors. That's probably not the exactly perfect way to say this. No, it's good enough. There's no moving currents outside of conductors. There's just force, rays of force. Okay, now it's enough. So till the next time and such. I really think it's enough.